Hey there. Welcome to the home of movies. Today, we move back to the superhero world, as we get into yet another great animation. Spider-Man, Into the Spider-Verse. This animated movie begins with Peter Parker presenting himself as the familiar neighborhood Spider-Man. Everyone knows how famous he is now, what with him always saving New York, having his own comics, cereal, and even a Christmas CD. He has some flaws, but he takes his role as Spider-Man seriously because he is the one and only. Miles Morales, a kid from Brooklyn, is getting ready to start attending a private school. He lives with his parents, Jefferson and Rio. Miles walks around his neighborhood greeting friends and tagging public signs with homemade stickers. Jefferson, a cop, apprehends Miles and drives him to school. As they ride to school, they see a news report about Spider-Man, who Jeff despises. When they arrive, Jeff tells Miles he loves him, but Miles does not respond. Jeff then uses his radio to force Miles to say "I love you" back in front of all the other pupils, humiliating him. Miles settles into his schoolwork as he attempts to adapt to his new surroundings. At one of his lessons, he encounters Gwen Stacy, who does not immediately identify herself to him. Later, Miles sneaks out of his dorm to see his uncle Aaron, Jefferson's brother. He is somehow a black sheep because of his illegal acts. Miles tells him about Gwen, and Aaron urges him to try to attract her with a shoulder touch. Aaron is a fan of Miles' artwork, so the two travel to the tunnels near the metro to do some graffiti. When Miles snaps a picture of his work, a radioactive glitching spider climbs up his leg and bites his hand, but he simply lightly taps the spider off his hand before leaving with Aaron. The next day, Miles had a different feeling. He has a voice in his brain, his clothing are too small for him, and he is sweating furiously. After they properly introduce themselves, he runs into Gwen, who tries to make up a false name. Miles tries the shoulder touch, but his hand becomes trapped on Gwen's shoulder and then her hair, forcing them to go to the nurse to have her hair cut off. When Miles tries to return to his room, he is discovered by a security guard who accuses him of leaving his dormitory. Miles flees and hides in the man's office, absorbing everything while he continues to freak out. He climbs out the window and finds himself walking on the walls before dashing into the streets, astounded by his newfound capabilities and powers. Miles returns to the tunnel where the spider bit him earlier. As he studies it, it begins to glitch again. Miles quickly hides when his spider sense detects danger. Spider-Man enters as the Green Goblin pursues him. The battle brings them beneath Fisk Industries, where Wilson Fisk/Kingpin is trying to launch a super collider. Spider-Man takes the time to move Miles out of harm's way while fighting Goblin. Spidey realizes Miles resembles him as soon as the machine is turned on. Outside the city, some structures begin to strangely change into other shapes. In the tunnel, there is an explosion. Miles tries to aid Spidey, but Spidey urges him to hide before giving him the drive to shut down the collider. Spidey is surrounded by Kingpin, Goblin, and the Prowler, who remove his mask. Peter begs Kingpin not to restart the collider, even begging him to think about his family, but this enrages Kingpin, and he murders Spider-Man by slamming his fists down on him, as Miles looks on in despair. He dashes back home, where his parents find him, and dashes to embrace Jefferson. The news spreads that Spider-Man is no longer alive, and that he was Peter Parker. Every New Yorker is saddened. Miles buys a costume before attending Peter's memorial service, where many other supporters are dressed like the wall crawler. Aunt May stands sadly in the back as Mary Jane offers a tribute for her spouse. Miles is encouraged by MJ's remarks to take up the Spider-Man mantle. He wants to put his powers to the test, but he's not sure how to do so. He later visits Peter's grave, only to be cited by another man, Peter B. Parker. This Peter informs us in his own words that in his universe, he's been Spider-Man for years and is now an adult, but he's lost Aunt May and he was married to Mary Jane but is now divorced due to his not being able to work out his problems as Spidey, as well as him not wanting children when she did. He became depressed and gained weight, and suddenly the collider activated, transporting him to this dimension. After discovering Miles, he is knocked unconscious, prompting Miles to try to swing away with him as the police pursue them, only to crash on the streets as people walk by. Miles takes Peter to a safe location. After he correctly guesses the alternate dimension notion, he questions Peter on how he is still alive. Miles pulls out the drive that Peter from his universe gave him, which the other Peter refers to as a goober, but it's damaged. Peter frees himself and takes the broken goober in search of a new one so he may return home, as being in this dimension causes him to glitch and become unstable. Before Peter can leave on his own, Miles guilts him into allowing him to join so that they may put things right together. Miles and Peter, disguised in their costumes, travel to Alchemax Labs, where the collider's data is stored. Kingpin and his henchman Tombstone, as well as his top scientist, strive to find a way in. The reason Kingpin is running the Collider is to reconnect with his spouse Vanessa and son Richard. Years before, they witnessed him attempting to kill Spider-Man and fleeing, only to be fatally hit by a truck. Miles and Peter successfully sneak into the facility and locate the computer room. Miles begins to panic when he is unable to detach himself from the ceiling, just as Kingpin and his scientist arrive outside. Miles then discovers that he can become invisible while afraid. When the scientist enters the room, Peter is forced to try to seduce her. She is amazed that Spider-Man is still alive, but only so she can execute him. She then reveals her true identity as Dr. Olivia Octavius. As she assaults Peter, she shows her mechanical tentacles, but Miles takes the computer, allowing them to flee. Scientists chase them out of the lab and into the forest. When the enemies close in, the boys swing through the treetops, but Doc Ock is webbed up by a third spider person, Gwen. She tells Miles and Peter that she, too, has returned from another dimension after being bitten by a spider. She saved her dad's life there, but she couldn't save Peter. The three of them then flee through the forest. Doc Ock subsequently returns to Kingpin, who is enraged to discover two additional Spider-Men in the area. Miles, Peter, and Gwen travel to Aunt May's house, when she discovers that the Peter she sees in front of her is from another universe. She leads them to Peter's former hidden hideout, which is filled with various suits, devices, and cars. The three encounter Spider-Man Noir, a black and white old gangster talking hero, Penny Parker and her radioactive spider-powered robot, and Peter Porker, aka Spider-Ham, who was actually a spider bitten by a radioactive pig. They were all drawn from their own dimensions and into Miles' world. They each intend to stay behind and shut down the Collider with a new goober so that the rest of the crew can return home, but Miles insists that it must be him because this is his dimension. As Peter tries to back him up by mentioning Miles' awesome powers, he is unable to activate them and demonstrate to the others that he is capable of assisting. Miles becomes invisible and dejectedly exits the cave. Miles travels to Aaron's house for assistance, just as Jefferson and Rio call Aaron because they haven't heard from Miles in a while. Miles discovers Aaron's home empty, but encounters Prowler inside, forcing him to become invisible once again. Prowler approaches Kingpin and takes off his disguise, exposing himself to be Aaron. Miles is shocked. He tries to flee the flat, but Aaron pursues him throughout the city until he manages to elude him. Miles returns to Aunt May's house to inform the other spider people that his uncle is working for Kingpin. Unfortunately, Miles has led Prowler, Doc Ock, Goblin, Tombstone, and Scorpion there. When the enemies attack, the spider people leap into action. Aunt May joins in the fun by protecting her home. Prowler pursues Miles and pursues him to the rooftop. Kingpin instructs Prowler to kill Miles until he removes his mask and reveals himself to his uncle. Aaron is ashamed that he nearly murdered his nephew. As he retreats, Kingpin shoots Aaron in the back and then goes for Miles, who swings out with his uncle. He leads Aaron to an alley where he dies. Miles hates himself for what occurred, but Aaron pushes him to keep going. Miles flees after Jefferson discovers him over Aaron's body. Jeff then sees his brother and cries. Miles returns to his dormitory, where he is joined by the other spider people. His roommate passes out after seeing them creep up the wall. Peter webs Miles up to his seat and takes the goober to stop the Collider, assuring Miles it's for his own protection. Once they leave, Jeff approaches Miles's dormitory outside, but he is unable to answer due to the web. Jeff tells him about Aaron and merely wishes Miles well. Miles manages to find the strength to use his ability to free himself. Miles returns to Aunt May's and obtains the original Spider-Man outfit, which he spray paints dark colors. He then swings about the city, more confident in his abilities. The other spider people find Kingpin's event and sneak in because the staff is wearing Spidey masks. Peter visits MJ and tries to express his regret for leaving her, despite the fact that she has no idea who he is or what he is talking about. They move down to the Collider, but Kingpin's thugs discover them and attack. Miles swings in and joins his colleagues in battle. To make matters worse, the Collider is ignited, producing yet another earthquake throughout the city as universes begin to warp together. Spider-Man Noir battles Tombstone, Penny and SP/Dr. Battle Goblin, and Spider-Ham beats Scorpion with a cartoon mallet. Doc Ock pursues Gwen and Peter, while Miles attempts to shut down the Collider. The goons are dispatched, and Doc Ock is run over by an interdimensional truck. However, SP/Doctor is severely wounded, leaving Penny distressed while Noir and Spider-Ham console her. She returns the spider as they prepare to return home. They say their goodbyes, with Penny leaving first, followed by Noir and Spider-Ham. Before leaving, Gwen confirms her bond with Miles. Peter attempted to stay behind and assist, but Miles chose to send Peter back so that he may mend what needs to be fixed in his world. Miles then pursues the collider, but Kingpin responds violently. As their dimensions begin to cross over, he begins to glimpse a new Vanessa and Richard. When Kingpin appears to overcome Miles, he notices Jefferson entering the scene. Miles stands up and uses his strength to blast Kingpin away before sending him webbed up toward the switch that will permanently shut off the collider. Miles contacts Jeff from outside to let him know he's fine. He then approaches him as Spider-Man and hugs him, telling him he's doing a fantastic job but not revealing his true identity. Jeff then discovers Kingpin webbed up and ready for arrest. Miles now juggles his regular academic responsibilities with his new position as Spider-Man, gaining several new followers around the city. Meanwhile, in Peter's dimension, he goes to reconcile with MJ. A dimensional gateway opens, and Miles hears Gwen's voice beckoning to him as he relaxes into his chamber for a nap. There is a section dedicated to Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. During the credits, Miguel O'Hara or Spider-Man 2099 learns about the other Spider people via his assistant Lila. He take a trip to Earth 67, where he gets into a strange pointing contest with the Spider-Man from the 1960s animation, putting an end to the movie. Thanks for watching.